Welcome to Headstones and Microphones, where we use AI to step into the past through a researched, first-person simulation of history's most interesting people. I am your host, Calvin. While we've added some creative storytelling, our goal is to inspire your own study of these fascinating lives. Now, let's meet our guest. Ian, welcome to the show. For those who may somehow not know who are you?
Hello, Calvin. Well, if anyone is in the dark, I am Ian Fleming, the man who poured his wartime imagination, love for travel, and perhaps a bit of his own vices into a typewriter to create a rather suave gentleman by the name of James Bond, Secret Agent 007.
A true legend. Let's start at the very beginning. When and where were you born?
I entered this grand world on the 28th of May, 1908. I was born at 27 Green Street in the lovely, bustling city of London.
And what was your given name at birth?
I was given the name Ian Lancaster Fleming.
Is there a story behind your birth name?
Well, the Fleming comes from my grandfather, Robert Fleming, who was a spectacularly wealthy Scottish financier. He really established our family's footprint. The Lancaster was a bit of a traditional nod, but it was my father, Valentine Fleming, who truly gave that name weight. He was a member of Parliament and a brave soldier.
What was your hometown like growing up?
Growing up, our world split between the high society energy of London and the sprawling, beautiful countryside of Oxfordshire, where we lived at a large estate called Brazier's Park. It was quite idyllic, filled with rolling green hills, large rooms, and plenty of space for young boys to get into trouble.
What was your family life like?
It was privileged, but overshadowed by a great gravity. I was the second of four brothers. My father was a brilliant, highly respected man. Tragically, he was killed on the Western Front in 1917, just days before my 9th birthday. His death left a massive void. My mother, Evelyn, was a formidable, fiercely independent woman who inherited his estate in trust. She ruled our lives with a very firm hand, constantly pushing us to live up to our father's heroic legacy.
What kind of kid were you?
Oh, I was a bit of a rebel and a restless soul, to be quite honest. I wasn't much for the strict academic grind. When I went to Eton College, I channeled all my frantic energy into athletics and sports rather than Latin. I actually became the Victor Ludorum, the champion of games, 2 years in a row. I also dabbled in school journalism, preferring the thrill of writing and riding motorbikes to sitting quietly in a classroom.
What were your biggest fears growing up?
My biggest fear, without a doubt, was the crushing weight of underachievement. My older brother, Peter, was brilliant, a spectacular scholar and writer who did everything right. I constantly feared that I would never step out from his shadow, or worse, that I would disappoint my mother and fail to honor my father's memory.
What did you dream of becoming as a child?
As a young boy, I fancied myself a bit of an adventurer or a soldier, following the grand tradition of the British Empire. I wanted a life of action, though I hadn't quite figured out what shape that action would take.
What were some of your favorite activities in school?
Aside from dominating the track and field events at Eton, my absolute favorite activity was editing a school magazine called The Wyvern with my close friend Ivar Bryce. I used my mother's societal connections to get famous artists and writers to contribute drawings and poems. It was my first taste of creating something from scratch.
What was your first job?
After a rather disastrous stint at Sandhurst Military College, discipline and I simply did not align, and failing the Foreign Office exams, my mother helped me secure a job with the Reuters news agency. That was my first proper job, and it sent me to Berlin and Moscow.
Was there a moment where you realized you were different from everyone else?
It was during my time with Reuters in Moscow in 1933. I was covering the British engineers who were being tried by the Soviet Union for espionage. Surrounded by the cold reality of Soviet interrogations and the tense atmosphere of international intrigue, I realized I had a unique knack for absorbing the grit, the tension, and the mechanics of secrets. I saw the world through a sharper, more dramatic lens than the average banker or clerk.
What's a decision that changed everything for you but felt small at the time?
Taking a job as a stockbroker after my stint in journalism, I was a completely hopeless stockbroker, mind you. I hated the math and the routine. But that decision placed me in the elite banking circles where I made friends with people who eventually recommended me to naval intelligence when the Second World War broke out. If I hadn't taken that boring finance job, I would have never become an intelligence officer.
What was your biggest break?
My biggest break was being appointed as the personal assistant to Rear Admiral John Godfrey, the director of naval intelligence during the war. He made me his troubleshooter. I was given the keys to the kingdom of British espionage, creating deception plots, organizing commando units, and orchestrating top secret operations. That wartime room was the laboratory where James Bond was truly forged.
What were your biggest struggles before success?
A total lack of direction. Before the war, I drifted from journalism to finance, never really succeeding or finding my passion. I wanted to live a luxurious life, independent of my family's money, but I kept failing to find my footing. I felt like a leaf blowing in the wind.
Did you ever consider quitting?
Not quitting life, but certainly quitting the mundane world. Before the war anchored me, I frequently wanted to just pack a bag and disappear into the far corners of the earth to escape the expectations of London high society.
Were there any specific daily habits or routines that you feel are essential to your success?
Absolutely. When I finally sat down to write at my Jamaican estate, Goldeneye, I adhered to a strict, unyielding routine. I would wake up early, go for a refreshing swim in the ocean completely naked, eat a marvelous breakfast of scrambled eggs, and then sit at my typewriter. I would type for 3 hours in the morning and 1 hour in the late afternoon. I forced myself to write about 2,000 words a day straight through without ever looking back at what I wrote the day before. Consistency and a couple of stiff pink gins at lunch were essential.
What job would you have had if fame never happened?
I likely would have remained a foreign manager for a newspaper, perhaps a quiet journalist traveling the world, or a full-time beachcomber in the Caribbean, catching lobsters with a spear.
What was your life like before fame?
It was a whirlwind of high-level secrets and worldly pleasures. After the war, I worked as the foreign manager for the Sunday Times, which graciously allowed me to spend 2 glorious months every winter in Jamaica. I lived a bachelor's life of fine dining, heavy smoking, and traveling, but without the public eye watching my every move.
How did relationships change after success?
Success brought a lot of noise. Suddenly, everyone wanted a piece of the man who created Bond. My marriage to my brilliant wife Anne was already tempestuous. We married right around the time my first book, Casino Royale, came out. But the sudden influx of fame, fans, and Hollywood dealings certainly added an extra layer of strain to our private world.
Did fame bring happiness?
It brought a sense of accomplishment and a very comfortable bank account. But I wouldn't equate it with pure happiness. Happiness for me was always the quiet, warm breeze of Jamaica, a swim in the sea, and a good book. Fame was just the noisy byproduct of my imagination.
What was the downside of becoming famous?
The loss of privacy and the constant pressure to deliver. Once the Bond phenomenon took off, the public and the publishers demanded a new book every single year. It turned my beloved escape into a demanding factory. I began to feel like a prisoner to my own creation.
What misconceptions did people have about you?
People often assume that I was James Bond, that I was a lethal, flawless super spy who drank martinis and saved the world single-handedly. In reality, I was an office-bound intelligence coordinator who loved scrambled eggs, suffered from a bad back, and possessed an adolescent mind that simply enjoyed a good, thrilling yarn.
What was your darkest moment?
The year 1961 was exceptionally dark. I suffered a severe heart attack during a Sunday Times editorial meeting. My health began a steep, agonizing decline from there, and the physical limitations felt like a cage to a man who loved physical freedom.
What past regrets did you carry that you spoke about?
I sometimes regretted treating the literary craft so lightly in the beginning. I used to dismiss my books as bang bang, kiss kiss, trash, written for adolescents. Later on, I realized they meant much more to people, and I wished I had treated my own talent with a bit more respect early on.
What's something people misunderstood about your life?
People thought my life was an effortless, glamorous holiday. They didn't see the heavy toll the writing took on my health, or the immense pressure of keeping up with the global phenomenon that 007 became. It wasn't all sunshine and gold.
Tell me about a time when everything went wrong and how did you handle it?
At Easter 1964, I foolishly played a full round of golf in the pouring rain. I drove home in my soaking wet clothes, which caused me to develop severe pleurisy. It landed me right back in the hospital, further devastating my already fragile health. How did I handle it? I simply endured it with a stiff upper lip, as any proper Englishman would.
Did fame and fortune change your life?
It gave me total financial independence, which I had craved since my youth. I could buy whatever I wanted and live exactly where I wanted. But at the same time, it didn't change my basic soul. I still wanted the same simple pleasures of the sun and the sea.
What personal battles were you fighting privately?
I fought a constant losing battle against my own vices. I was a terribly heavy drinker and smoked up to 70 unfiltered cigarettes a day. Even when my doctors explicitly warned me that my heart couldn't take it, I couldn't abandon the habits that had fueled my lifestyle for decades.
Who had the biggest influence on your life?
Aside from my demanding mother, it was Ernan Forbes Dennis, a former British spy turned educator whom I met in Austria after I left Sandhurst. He and his novelist wife, Phyllis Bottom, taught me languages, guided my unruly nature, and were the very first people to suggest that I had a gift for writing.
What was life like in your final years?
It was a frustrating battle against a failing body. My heart was weak, my energy was depleted, and I was restricted from doing the active things I loved, like golfing and swimming in the deep Caribbean waters.
What were you working on in your career before you passed away?
While my health was failing, I actually stepped away from spies to write a whimsical children's story for my only son, Casper, about a magical flying car called Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. I was also putting the finishing touches on the final Bond manuscripts, like The Man with the Golden Gun.
When and where and how did you pass away and how old were you?
I passed away from heart failure on the 12th of August, 1964, at a hospital in Canterbury, Kent. I was just 56 years old.
What's a random fact about you most people have never heard?
I was an avid collector of rare, historically significant books. I focused on books that marked the literal start of human milestones, like the birth of television, the discovery of penicillin, or the first theories of flight.
What's the craziest rumor ever told about you?
There was a rumor that during the war, I personally executed a top-secret plan to capture Nazi official Rudolf Hess using occultist Aleister Crowley as bait. While I did suggest some wild intelligence plots, that one was pure mythology.
What was your most unique habit?
I insisted on using a custom-made, gold-plated Remington portable typewriter to write my Bond novels at GoldenEye. I felt the gold touch gave the thrillers just the right amount of flash.
What was your favorite food?
As I mentioned earlier, I absolutely abhorred complex, snobby food. My favorite food in the entire world was a perfectly prepared plate of scrambled eggs. Simple, elegant, and flawless.
Did you have a favorite restaurant?
Scott's in London, a magnificent seafood restaurant where I spent many an evening enjoying oysters and fine spirits.
What was your favorite book?
I always had a deep fondness for Treasure Island by Robert Louis Stevenson. It is the ultimate tale of adventure, secrets, and exotic locations. Everything that stirs a young man's imagination.
Did you have any known rivalries?
My rivalries were mostly with the literary critics of the time who looked down their noses at my thrillers, dismissing them as devoid of literary merit. I loved proving them wrong by selling millions of copies.
Tell us a story nobody talks about.
During the war, I designed a specialized unit called 30 Assault Unit, a team of commandos who went in right ahead of the frontline troops to steal enemy codebooks, documents, and tech. I didn't fight in the field with them, but watching my Red Indians, as I called them, successfully pull off those daring raids was one of the proudest achievements of my life.
What's your funniest behind-the-scenes moment?
When the first Bond film, Dr. No, was being cast, I initially suggested that my cousin, the elegant actor Christopher Lee, should play Dr. No. The producers completely ignored my suggestion. Of course, Christopher did eventually play a marvelous Bond villain later on, but at the time, I realized I had very little power over my own cinematic universe.
Did you ever prank someone?
Oh, my friend Ivar Bryce and I used to play all sorts of minor tricks on each other during our travels. But during the war, the pranks turned into massive, elaborate deceptions, played directly on the German high command to trick them about troop movements. Those were the ultimate pranks.
What was the most outlandish purchase you made?
Buying the plot of land in Jamaica and building my estate, Goldeneye, in 1946. At the time, people thought I was mad to buy a wild, undeveloped cliffside in the Caribbean, but it turned out to be the best investment I ever made.
What advice would you give people chasing success?
Never apologize for your passions, and write about what truly excites you, not what you think society expects of you. Treat life as an adventure. Put your head down, do the work, and remember that a bit of luck favors the bold.
Ian, do you have any closing remarks about the interview or the stories you shared that you would like to share with the listeners before signing off?
Only that history is far more vibrant and laced with adventure than any textbook can ever convey. I hope my stories remind everyone to live their lives with a bit of flair and curiosity. Thank you immensely for having me on the show, Calvin. It's been a grand chat.
It truly has. Thank you so much for stopping by, Ian. What a brilliant look into the life of the mastermind behind 007, from wartime intelligence rooms to the sunny shores of Jamaica. And that wraps up another conversation from Beyond the Grave. Thanks for joining us on the Headstones and Microphones podcast. Remember, legends may die, but their stories never do. Please help spread the word by sharing and following the pod.